Picture it. A forest at dawn, cold mist hanging between the trees, wet leaves, soft green moss, a cold river, smooth round stones, a patch of sand, a drift of fresh snow, and you standing there in the middle of all of it, with a full bladder, a churning gut, and absolutely no idea what happens next. Because there is no bathroom, no toilet paper, no soap, no sink, no running water, no little lock on a little door. There is just you, the open wilderness, and a very old, very urgent problem. So here is the question nobody wants to ask, but everybody has wondered. How did ancient humans actually go to the toilet? It sounds like a joke. It is not. Because the way a creature deals with its own waste turns out to be one of the most important survival problems in the entire history of life. Get it wrong, and you poison your own water, you attract predators to your door, and you breed the parasites that will quietly kill your children. Get it right, and you can build a village, then a town, then a city, then a civilization. This unglamorous, slightly gross question is hiding one of the biggest stories of how we became human. So let's dig into it. Carefully. Let's start with the deep past. Before villages, before farms, before anything. You are a wandering hunter-gatherer. A small band, maybe 20, 30 people. You walk, you follow the herds, you camp for a few days, and then you move on. And this constant movement, it turns out, is your first and best toilet strategy. Think about a dog, or a cat, or a wolf. Animals don't foul their own den. A wolf trots away from the sleeping area, does its business in the bushes, and comes back. Ancient humans did exactly the same thing. You didn't go where you slept. You didn't go where you ate. You walked away from camp, past the fire, past the sleeping mats, out to the edge, near a tree, behind a rock, and you did what you had to do. And then, crucially, you left. A few days later, the whole band packed up and walked to a fresh valley, and the problem you left behind was miles away, drying in the sun, breaking down, forgotten. Movement was the plumbing. As long as you kept walking, your waste never piled up faster than the land could swallow it. The forest was your flush. The whole wide world was one enormous self-cleaning toilet, and you were just passing through. But that still leaves the awkward practical question, the one you're actually thinking about right now. What did they use to clean up? Because there was no toilet paper. Toilet paper is astonishingly recent. For most people on Earth, soft paper on a roll is barely 100 years old. So what did billions of humans use for hundreds of thousands of years before it existed? The answer is, whatever was nearby. And the list is longer and stranger than you would ever think. Leaves, obviously. Big soft leaves were the classic. But you learned fast which leaves to grab and which to never, ever touch. Because some plants leave you far worse off than when you started. Moss. Beautifully soft, absorbent, and often growing right there on the rock. In colder places, a handful of snow. By the sea, a smooth, flat shell, or a pad of dried seaweed. By a river, the best option of all. Water, using your left hand. Which is exactly why, in huge parts of the world, the left hand is still the unclean hand to this very day. You do not eat with it. You do not greet with it. That custom is thousands of years old, and it started right here, at the edge of a river with no paper in sight. And then there are the odder ones. Smooth stones kept in a little pile, dry corncobs later once farming arrived, bundles of dry grass, soft animal fur, a handful of sand. Later cultures got creative and specific. In ancient Greece, people used pessoi, little pieces of broken pottery, and sometimes, if they were feeling spiteful, they would scratch the name of an enemy onto the shard first. In Japan, thin flat sticks called chugi. Wool, if you were rich. Hemp. And in the ancient Roman world, the most infamous tool of all, a sea sponge on the end of a wooden stick, sitting in a bucket of salt water or vinegar, shared by every single person who used that public toilet. Which is roughly as horrifying as it sounds. The point is this: For almost all of human history, cleaning up meant reaching for the world around you and hoping you grabbed the right thing. Now here is where it stops being funny and starts being deadly serious. Because waste is not just gross. Waste is dangerous. And ancient humans, without ever understanding why, were locked in a constant invisible war with it. Problem number 1. Predators. Your waste is a giant smelly announcement. To a wolf, to a hyena, to a big cat, a fresh human dropping is a signpost that reads, "A slow, soft, warm animal was here recently, and it may still be close." Ancient humans seem to have understood this on some instinctive level. You didn't go right next to camp, partly for the smell, but partly because you did not want to paint a scent trail leading a leopard straight to your sleeping children. Going to the toilet, believe it or not, was a moment of real danger. You were alone, crouched, distracted, vulnerable, out at the edge of the firelight, with the dark pressing in. Problem number 2 is worse, and it is invisible. Disease. Human waste is full of bacteria and, above all, parasites. Worms, eggs, tiny hitchhikers that get back into your body through your mouth, through your food, through your water, and set up home in your gut. And we are not guessing about this. We have proof. Disgusting, beautiful scientific proof. It is called a coprolite. A coprolite is fossilized poop. Ancient human waste, dried and hardened and preserved for thousands of years, and to an archaeologist, it is an absolute treasure. Because when you carefully break one open and look inside, it is a time capsule. You can see exactly what that person ate. Seeds, bits of bone, fish scales, fibers, undigested plants. You can reconstruct an entire ancient diet from a single fossil dropping. And you can also see the enemy. The parasite eggs, the worms, the invisible war frozen in the fossil, tens of thousands of years old. Coprolites have told us that ancient humans all over the world were absolutely riddled with intestinal parasites. This was normal. This was everyday life. A low, grinding burden of worms that made you weaker, hungrier, and more likely to die from the next thing that came along. And the way those parasites spread was simple and grim. Through waste that got too close to food and too close to water. So now you can see the real reason those instincts mattered so much. Go too close to the river, and you poison your own drinking water. Go too close to camp, and you feed the parasites that feed on your kids. The tribes that had strong, deep habits about where to go and where absolutely not to go, those tribes were healthier. They had more children survive. And over thousands of years, those careful habits didn't just get taught. They arguably got baked into us. As instincts, as disgust, as that powerful automatic sense of yuck that you still feel today. Your disgust reflex, that flinch, that gag, is ancient survival software. It kept your ancestors alive. And that word, disgust, is a bigger deal than it sounds. Because the feeling of disgust may be one of the oldest tools our minds ever built. It is a warning system with no words. It doesn't explain the parasites. It can't. Nobody knew they existed. It just makes the bad thing feel wrong, feel repulsive, feel untouchable. And that single feeling, multiplied across a whole species, kept waste and mouths apart for hundreds of thousands of years. Disgust was the first public health system, and it ran entirely on instinct, long before anyone had a word for germ. For as long as humans kept moving, this whole fragile system worked. Walk, camp, leave. Walk, camp, leave. The land absorbed everything. But then, roughly 12,000 years ago, humans did something that broke it completely. Something wonderful, something catastrophic. They stopped walking. We call it farming. We call it civilization. And it created the single greatest waste crisis in the history of our species. Here is the problem. When you farm, You can't leave. Your wheat is in the ground. Your goats are in the pen. Your entire life is tied to one patch of earth, and you are going to stay there, in the same spot, for years, for generations. And so, for the first time ever, a large number of humans were living in one place, permanently, all producing waste, every single day, that could no longer just be left behind and walked away from. The math is brutal. One person moving is nothing. The land shrugs it off. But 100 people, then 1,000 people, then 10,000 people, all standing still in one town day after day, year after year, that is a mountain of waste with nowhere to go. And it does not just vanish, it seeps into the soil, into the wells, into the river everyone is drinking from and cooking with and washing in. The early farming towns, some of the first dense settlements our species ever built, were, to put it bluntly, disgusting and dangerous places. Archaeologists digging into them find the evidence everywhere. Piles of refuse, layers of filth built up over centuries, and parasite loads in the ancient waste that are dramatically higher than anything you see in the wandering hunter-gatherers who came before. We paid a terrible price for settling down. We traded freedom of movement for a permanent, festering problem right outside the front door. So humanity, having created this brand new catastrophe, had to invent a brand new solution. And this is where the real story of the toilet finally begins. At first, the answer was simple, and it was old. Dig a hole, a pit, a dedicated spot away from the houses, where the waste goes and stays and slowly breaks down underground. The humble pit latrine. It sounds like nothing, but think about what it represents. It is a decision made by a community to control where waste goes on purpose together. It is the first infrastructure, the first plumbing, a hole in the ground that says, this is the place, and everywhere else is not. And then, in a few extraordinary places, ancient humans took it even further, thousands of years earlier than most people imagine. Let me show you a few of them. Go to the far north of Scotland, to a windswept coast 5,000 years ago. There sits a tiny stone village called Skara Brae. Little houses built of flat gray stone, huddled together against the wind, older than the pyramids, older than Stonehenge. And built into the walls of some of those houses, archaeologists found small stone cubicles, with drains running underneath them, out through the walls, away from the home. A toilet. An actual plumbed indoor toilet in a stone hut 5,000 years ago on a freezing island at the edge of the world. These were not emperors. These were ordinary farmers and fishermen, and they had already decided that waste belonged in a drain, not in the house. Now go to the other side of the world, to the valley of the Indus River, to a vast ancient city called Mohenjo-Daro, and prepare to be amazed, because this might be the cleanest city of the entire ancient world. Straight streets, laid out on a grid, brick houses, many with their own private bathroom. And beneath the streets, a breathtaking network of covered drains, running along every road, carrying waste and dirty water out of the city. Households had chutes and clay pipes built into their walls that fed the waste down into the public sewers below. This is 4,500 years ago. A whole city of tens of thousands of people with municipal plumbing. It would take much of the rest of the world thousands more years to catch up. These were some of the first humans to look at their own filth and engineer a way to make it simply disappear. And then there is Rome. Because if anyone made ancient plumbing famous, it was the Romans. Beneath the city ran the Cloaca Maxima, the Great Drain, one of the oldest sewers in the world. A tunnel so large you could float a boat down it, carrying the city's waste out into the river Tiber. The Romans were so proud of their sewers that they had a goddess for them. Cloacina, the spirit of the drains. And above ground, they built the public toilet into a social institution. Picture a long stone bench with a row of round holes cut into it side by side, no walls, no dividers, no privacy at all. 20 people sitting shoulder to shoulder, chatting about politics and business, doing their business together. In front of them ran a little channel of clean, flowing water, and that is where the infamous sponge on a stick came in. You used it, you rinsed it in the channel, and you passed it to your neighbor. It looks impressive, and in many ways it was. But do not romanticize it. Those glorious Roman sewers often emptied straight into the same river people drew their water from. The public toilets were breeding grounds for disease, swirling with the very parasites everyone was trying to escape. The dark sewers below could fill with pockets of methane gas that sometimes ignited, and with rats, and worse, coming up the pipes. Roman plumbing was a genuine marvel and a genuine health hazard, both at the same time. Progress, it turns out, is rarely clean. And here is the thing to remember. Rome was the exception, not the rule. For most people, in most cities, for thousands of years, there was no grand sewer at all. There was a pot, a simple chamber pot, kept under the bed or in the corner. You filled it in the night, and in the morning, in cramped and crowded towns, you got rid of it in the fastest way possible. You opened the window, you shouted a warning to the street below, and you threw it out. In parts of old Europe, the warning cry was Gardy Lou. If you were walking down the wrong street at the wrong moment, the sky itself was a hazard. The streets of medieval cities ran with filth, with mud that was not only mud, and the smell, by every account we have, was absolutely staggering. Somebody had to deal with all of it. And that job fell to one of the most important, most disgusting, and most dangerous professions in history: the night soil collector. In medieval England, they were called gong farmers. They worked only at night. They climbed down into the cesspits beneath the houses by candlelight and shoveled out the waste by hand, load after load, and carted it out of the city before dawn. It was a suffocating, sickening, hazardous job. Pits collapsed. Gases choked. There is a real record of one gong farmer named Richard the Raker who, in the 14th century, fell into his own cesspit and drowned in it. But the work paid surprisingly well, precisely because almost nobody else was willing to do it. These were the invisible men who kept the city from burying itself. Now here is a twist that most people never expect. In other parts of the world, that very same waste was not a nuisance to be hidden. It was treasure. In much of East Asia, in China, in Japan, in Korea, human waste was carefully collected, not to throw away, but to sell. It was called night soil, and it was a valuable fertilizer, spread across the fields to grow the next season's food. Cities had a whole economy built around it. Collectors bought it, farmers paid for it, and a family's waste was quietly recycled back into the rice that fed them. It sounds strange to us, but it was, in its own way, brilliant. It kept the streets far cleaner than many Western cities of the same era, and it closed the loop between the toilet and the table. One culture's problem was another culture's product. Step back and look at what a sewer or a night soil system or even a simple shared latrine actually is. To build a sewer, you need a plan. You need cooperation. Hundreds of people agreeing to dig, to build, to maintain. You need an idea of the future, a sense that keeping the city clean today protects your children tomorrow. The sewer is not just a pipe. The sewer is a civilization thinking about itself. It is a group of humans deciding together that the health of everyone is worth the effort of everyone. In a very real way, the drain beneath the street is one of the truest signs that a civilization has grown up. And yet, for most people, in most places, for most of history, none of the grand solutions existed. The great sewers were rare, precious exceptions. The reality for the vast majority of humans for thousands of years was still the pit, the pot, the bucket, the field, the river, and a whole lot of hoping for the best. Cities would rise and grow faster than anyone could manage the waste, and again the filth would catch up with them in the form of plagues and epidemics that swept through crowded streets, carried by the very thing everyone tried so hard to ignore: The story of waste is not a straight line up. It is a long, messy struggle, lost and won and lost again, city after city, century after century. And here's the part that should genuinely shock you. The clean, quiet, private bathroom you take for granted is one of the newest things in this entire story. The flush toilet as we know it, the one that actually works, only really arrived a couple of 100 years ago, when someone finally perfected a simple, brilliant trick. A bend in the pipe, an S shape that traps a little pool of water and seals the smell of the sewer out of your home. That single curve of pipe changed everything. Before it, even the fanciest indoor toilets belched the stench of the drains straight back up at you. And clean running water, piped into ordinary homes, together with real sewers to carry the waste safely away, did not become normal for most people until barely 150 years ago, when overflowing, exploding cities were finally forced to act after the filth in their rivers became impossible to ignore. Historians and doctors will tell you flatly that clean water and the humble sewer have saved more human lives than any drug, any surgery, any medical breakthrough in history. Not a pill, a pipe. The most powerful health technology our species ever built is the one we flush without a second thought. So let's come back to where we started. To the forest at dawn. The cold mist, the wet leaves, the smooth stones, the full bladder, and the very old problem. It is easy to laugh at the question of how ancient humans went to the toilet. But look at what that little question was hiding. It was hiding predators and instincts. It was hiding worms and disgust, and the first public health system running silently inside our own minds. It was hiding the terrible price we paid when we stopped wandering and settled down. And it was hiding the invention of the pit, the drain, the sewer, the sponge, the pot, the gong farmer in the dark, and the quiet, buried machinery that lets millions of strangers live crammed together in a city without drowning in their own waste. Every time you close a bathroom door, you are standing at the end of a 100,000-year story. A story written in leaves and moss and smooth stones, in fossilized droppings and ancient parasites, in the deep instinct that still makes you walk a little further away, in the first hole ever dug on purpose, and in the first drain ever laid beneath the street. It is one of the least glamorous stories our species has. And it is also, quietly, one of the most human. Because in the end, the toilet is not really about waste at all. It is about a strange, clever, disgusted, cooperative animal that looked at its own worst problem, and instead of just walking away from it forever, slowly, over thousands of years, figured out how to build a world where it could finally stay. Thanks for watching. If you like the questions most people are too polite to ask, subscribe and stick around, because next time we are digging into another strange, forgotten corner of the world of